Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is wrapping up his high-stakes trip to Paris today, where he's set to meet with top diplomats and global economic development. He is holding talks with foreign ministers from Italy, Spain, Hungary, and Colombia. And this all comes, of course, after meeting with top French leaders yesterday in an effort to repair relations between the two countries following a major diplomatic dispute over a submarine deal. French President Emmanuel Macron and President Biden are scheduled to meet later on this month. So for more on this, I want to bring in Face the Nation moderator and senior foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan. Margaret, really glad you're joining us this morning. Anthony Blinken met with French President Emmanuel Macron yesterday. It was a meeting that wasn't on his agenda in the wake of the Australia-U.S. submarine deal. How did that go? What did they discuss?
Well, it wasn't at all certain that they would even get that kind of FaceTime with the French president. That's why it wasn't on the schedule. And the fact that the Secretary of State did get that significant chunk of time with the French president says how much, it speaks to how much the U.S. is pressing to really try to heal this wound. And in many ways, it was a self-inflicted one that the United States is really sort of surprised at, to the degree that the French have continued to say they resent what has happened between two allies. France is one of our very oldest allies, and they felt very much slighted by that decision to sell nuclear-powered submarines to Australia in a manner that they deemed to be secret and meant to cover up the fact that the U.S. would get billions of dollars worth of business at the expense of the French, who lost tens of billions. The French actually sent a bill to Australia in the amount of $66 billion, saying that's how much it was costing to one defense contractor. So this is really a full court press by the Secretary of State, who has spent years of his own life growing up in Paris, has family there, is a Francophile, and so he is being sent as the messenger to try to heal this and move beyond it.
That's interesting. Yeah, it almost seemed a little bit like diplomatic amateur hour, where Australia was sort of saying, oh, don't you remember we told you this deal was off? And France was saying, no, yes. You never told us, or you told us at the last minute. It was so odd. But not surprising, it's created a bit of bad blood. So Macron will be meeting with President Biden next month. What do we know about that meeting?
Well, you're right that it was a real surprise because this didn't need to happen. But what we know is that it is a bit of cleanup. The Australians may bear some responsibility here, which is kind of surprising given how frank Australians are known for being. I pressed the Australian Prime Minister on this point when I spoke to him just a few weeks ago. And he insists that the French were kept in the loop. But obviously, they had a very different impression. And let's be clear, they are coming up on an election for the French president, Emmanuel Macron. And so a little bit of nationalist furor may not hurt him, but he does have reason, according to all the diplomats around him, to feel very much slighted by this. And so when the two presidents do get to meet, and that's expected to be on the sidelines of this summit in Rome at the end of the month for the 20 largest economies in the world, the G20, they are expected to try to move beyond it. So I don't expect Macron and Biden to be rehashing this at that point. They will be looking beyond it. And for the United States, what they continue to emphasize at the top levels of the Biden administration is that this was not intended to be hurtful to the French. This was intended to be an attention-getting underscoring of just how serious the United States is about countering China in the Pacific. That is what that Australian nuclear submarine deal was. And they are trying to get allies like France alongside the U.S. to push back on this threat. But obviously, without intending it, caused a problem in their own strategy by creating a rift with one of our closest allies.
Yeah, I want to ask you about something else that we've been kind of watching here on CBSN AM. China's expansion, in particular recently, it's been sort of aggressive moves towards Taiwan. We know President Biden's strategy in regards to China has been to kind of, make friends in the neighborhood, if you will. What about the U.S.'s ongoing efforts to bolster a Western alliance against China? Is Blinken's trip also part of an effort to get France to join with this alliance?
Yes, you hit it on the head. That is a large part of how the U.S. views its closest allies now, as aligning with it. They'll tell you, very top national security officials don't view this as the new Cold War, but honestly, it is about creating blocks of alliances to offset the economic and military behemoth that China is trying to build itself into within the Pacific. For the French, it's interesting, actually, there were headlines today that French lawmakers were going on what is a regular routine visit for them to Taiwan, and it was really seen as making a point because they are going to Taiwan, a democracy backed by the Western powers, but viewed by China as rightfully theirs. They split back in about 1949 due to civil war. This is happening at a time when China's flying record numbers of overflights, sorties, military aircraft, going into Taiwanese air defenses to test them out. This is seen as a shot across the bow. This is seen as a statement by China to Taiwan to be on guard, because China very much views Taiwan as needing to be once again part of that greater China instead of independent. And so the United States is really trying to get Western powers to push back, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's Hong Kong, whether it's other areas where China has been trying to assert its dominance in what China would say is rightfully their own backyard. The rest of the world would say is a violation of international law.
It's really all interesting stuff that we're all watching closely, but especially you, Margaret. Margaret Brennan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.